Okay, so now let's start playing with some styles. So first of all, this navigation should float over here on the right. Now I'm saying float because that's just a natural term for me to use after having done many CSS-based layouts. The behavior of this should be that it should always be aligned to the right, even as the browser collapses down in size. So what we could do is just use a float to do that. So I'm gonna add float right to it. So that looks pretty spot on with what we have in our mockup. I'm gonna view this full page here. So yeah, it looks just about right. Right now we're aligning this element to the middle, and let's see how we're doing that. It looks like that's happening by the individual navigation. We're setting the margin right and left to auto and setting a fixed width. Now, however, it seems like that's not the best place for those styles because those really have to do with layout, and we don't need to lay out these individually, but we do need to lay out the wrapper, this site footer nav wrapper. So let's move these styles out so that they get applied to this wrapper instead. So I'm gonna go back to our editor and I'm gonna add a class for the nav wrapper. I'm gonna add it right here above the nav. So I'll do the ampersand to pull in the site footer dash nav wrapper, and I'll set the width and margin left and right here within the wrapper. Now we could explore moving some of these other styles to the wrapper as well, but I think this serves our purpose. So let's save this and refresh in the browser to take a look. Okay, so now this is happening to our div, which will allow us now to treat this as a unit. So for our social nav here, it looked like floating it right was working well. So let's add that permanently. So I'm gonna do a quick search in here for social nav to see if we have a selector for it. There it is. And we'll add this property directly under social nav. So we'll do float right. We'll save it and refresh. And so now we need to figure out what to do with this. Floating this element to the right made sense. And so I think floating this element to the left would also make sense. It would keep it left aligned. And also one nice thing about floats is that they collapse as the browser gets smaller. That's not necessarily going to come into play here because we'll set breakpoints and change the styling, but it's a good kind of rule of thumb. It means that these elements won't overlap each other, but instead they'll bump each other down, leaving them all visible even if the layout gets funky a little bit. So now if we added a float to this, what do you think would happen? Right now this element in the markup comes after the navigation, which is why we're right now seeing it below in terms of vertical positioning. If we float it to the left, I'll inspect this element and I'll select the container here and I'll add float left. We'd see our footer getting smaller, but that's something we can fix by using the overflow property and setting it to auto. But the problem that's harder to fix is the positioning of this. It looks like we need to move this element above the navigation element in order to be able to float it to the left. So let's change the markup to support that.